Okay, we're streaming. We're live.
Right.
All right.
Well, isn't that a great day?
And here we go. All right. Welcome, everybody. I'm doing this. This is kind of a group thing. So I'm hosting here, but we thought we'd watch a cheesy Christian movie. I don't know that much about it, and I'm really not even hosting this. I'm just hosting the media side of this. But this was Marm's idea, so maybe Marm would like to give us a little bit of the backstory on this. But yeah,
Sure thing.
He owes it to all of us, frankly.
Yeah, I messed up so much. I was boomering it up. So everybody, I was watching my old Christian cartoons again. I found this one. I tweeted out, "Hey, I'd like to anybody interested in chatting about this cartoon?" I made some new friends doing that, and my laptop froze this week. So Matt Crotts has heroically stepped in to host the show. Last time I tried this before my laptop issues kicked in, I was introducing people. This is some time has passed though, so let's go ahead and reintroduce everyone. So you might know him as the guy whose channel this is. He's Matt Crotts. He is a Christian comic book creator. He is currently funding. Kyrie Book 2 is still funding, right?
Yep. We're in demand until September.
Fantastic, and he's the hero of the hour today. Next, Artistic Layman is a Christian artist. I met him just as I was tweeting about this. Tell us a little bit about what you do, Artistic Layman.
Right now, I eventually make videos that involve Christian and entertainment commentary. In the meantime, I'm just working on other animation projects.
And have you ever seen this cartoon before?
I have, actually. I saw it way back when I was a youngster, and I remember liking it as a kid, but not quite so much now that I've gotten older.
Interesting. Next up, we've got Carl Toons. He is the creator. He does lots of drawings in a variety of styles. He was working on a comic called Hullgrave, which he's currently in the process of rebooting. Say hi, Carl.
Yo.
And you go by Carl Toons and Carl's Amateur Hour, right?
Yep.
Twitter, Instagram. He's a really cool guy. And Matt Reese is part of the creative team behind the Matriarchy. Let's see, you crowdfunded the Expositioner.
Yep. Solo Voce,
Yep.
which we're in the middle of production on, and I've been doing indie and web comics since 2005. 2006 is probably more accurate, with our little group Ideal Comics out of Western Nebraska. And I also my YouTube show is a weekly talk show, kind of like the Dick Cavett show or the old Tom Snyder show, which is totally makes me sound older than I am.
Yeah. You just turned into a 65-year-old.
Yeah, I'm about 10 to 15 years younger than I sounded just now. But with that, just because they don't do that kind of talk show anymore, where people just sit around and discuss the issues of the day in a way that isn't supposed to be intentionally funny or combative. So, there you go. That's the Thursday nights, 7 Mountain Time, and this next week, Doug Ernst, and Dan Thackerow will be on talking about the 7 deadly sins of crowdfunding.
Oh gosh!
Excellent.
Got to tune in.
That sounds useful. All right, so I will probably shamelessly steal this video from Matt Crotts, and when I host it on my channel, I will make sure to link to everybody so you can all go check them out. I have a little information on the Easter Promise, so I'll just go ahead and read that out. The Easter Promise was produced by the Christian Broadcasting Network, and it was released in 1996. It was directed by Angela Costello, who, while working with CBN, was twice nominated for the Annie Awards. She is also creator of the Christian children's series Storyteller Cafe. The original story for The Easter Promise was written by Brian Cochran. Character design and art direction was carried out by CBN's team in the United States. And the key animation was by Wang Film Productions in Taiwan. The same team has worked for many of the Disney Channel cartoons during the Disney afternoon era of the Disney Channel. They animated many of the direct-to-video Disney sequels in the 90s, and they continue to do animation work for big budget studios today. The overseas production was overseen by John Liu and Angela Costello. And also CBN claims that when The Easter Promise was nominated for the Annie, it was one of the first times that a Christian animated program was nominated for the award. So that's all my little historical info about this. And my one kind of like opening thought is, when I was a kid, I actually hated this movie because I was sad that Jesus died. Oh man.
Total.
And then I actually came to respect it a little. It's still cheesy, but I actually respect it more as an adult than I did when I was a little kid. So for me, it's a guilty pleasure.
Excellent.
All right, so that was all the intros I had, and I just want to thank everybody for being here. Thanks to Matt Crotts especially for being the man of the hour.
Yeah, cool. Well, all right. So does everyone can everyone see my screen?
Yeah.
Yep. Okay, cool.
Yes.
Yep.
I can see it.
Excellent.
And here's hoping there's no
Presented in
technical
Dolby Surround Sound. Trademarked.
So maybe. So now I'm thinking. So I was already at 54 seconds in. I'm wondering. Oh wait, no. Never mind. Okay, yeah, 5 seconds in. All right, pressing play, and 3, 2, 1, now. And just so everyone knows, apparently Marm has tried to stream this before and hasn't had any issue, so I don't think we're gonna have any copyright strikes.
Hopefully.
Martha.
Jesus, if you had been here, my brother would not have died.
Why is she bothering him now? Lazarus has been dead for 4 days.
Fear not, Martha. Your brother will live again.
He claims he can bring the dead back to life? Nonsense.
Yes, but look how many believe.
Thank you,
Like
Father,
the
for
Jafar
hearing my
Pharisee.
prayer.
And now
Yeah.
he calls
He looks like
God
an
his
Animaniacs
father?
character.
This can't be true. It's blasphemy.
Roll away the
Although
stone.
Amniac's character is a lot better than most things.
His voice sounded familiar.
Lazarus, come forth.
Drama.
That scream was extreme. Although you have to wonder how they
And let
do
him
what's
go.
react.
Jesus has brought our brother back from the dead.
Yeah, I don't
What
think
can
of
we
applause
do?
either.
Soon the whole nation will
It's
follow
kinda
this
nice to see it
man.
dramatic.
He must be stopped.
And what other acts
I
of
like
this
the
nature
I like the
can you
variety in the
report to
character design.
Sanhedrin?
Like each
With
member of
so
the
many
Pharisees and
believing in
Sadducees has their own
Jesus,
distinct
It
look.
is certain we
Yeah.
will lose control over our people. And if we lose control, the Romans will take over. Our council will crumble, and we'll all...
My dog does that too. Good clue.
Don't cry, Elizabeth.
Although, even from the description of the Bible, it's always such a surreal scene about having a Judas be there and Jesus kind of basically calling him out implicitly and
Oh, yeah.
no one else getting it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And no one like trying to stop him as if they didn't hear or didn't hear about this.
Yeah, it's
Like some of it is probably from like a limited budget, but you can tell that they actually cared about what they did.
yeah. There was a lot of effort put into this.
You know, 1 Corinthians says, then he appeared to more than 500 brothers at one time. So that's not even counting the women and children that might have been there as well.
Mm-hmm. And that might have been the ascension moment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's that.
Cool. That was fun. Do we do like a post?
I think we have to, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
By the way, Flyfox Pro, comic artist, has joined us just as we started the stream. So thanks for joining us, Flyfox.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
Cricket noise.
But watching this now, I remember, oh yeah, this is why I liked it as a kid.
so artistic layman, like you were kind of like the opposite of me, where you found it like cheesier as an adult, and you had some like criticisms that were going on. Do you have any like?
My only criticism now is just the presentation. Honestly, if there was just a way to like tweak up the kids' presentation, that would have been better. And of course, the songs are questionable.
Like maybe get like an older voice actor, like a 16-year-old who can still do like a convincing 13-year-old. Like you can tell from their voices, like these are actual little kids voicing the characters. So it gives them authenticity.
That may be a point for authenticity, but it's not entertaining.
Right. Like an actor actually has to kind of like feel the emotion. You can kind of tell when they're sad about Jesus. It's like, why he didn't say that this would happen, right? Like you can tell it's a little kid who's affecting sadness rather than like an actor who is, I don't know, like feeling the emotion of sadness. So we sense it.
I think part of the thing is like in terms of the narrative structure of it all, they say that Jesus said these things, but we didn't see him say those things. And we didn't see him say anything about it because he's such a small character prior to, the arrest. They spent more time on the clearing of the temple than on any other element besides the actual crucifixion in the screenplay. And I think that actually hinders effectiveness of the emotional reactions of the characters.
Like maybe seeing Jesus speak with the disciples would bring home the other side of it. Like we saw him, like what we see him do. We saw him overturn the money changers' tables. We saw him, use the parable of the coin, but we didn't see an aspect of Jesus for why his disciples love him. We didn't get much of a chance to see why the kids have an emotional love for him. And some of these things, it's like it's a good direction, but I don't know, maybe like the benefit of 10 more minutes of a runtime would have given them like a chance to.
I was going to say the same thing, like 10 minutes to the runtime. And I think it seemed like, especially towards the end, every shot needed 2 to 5 more seconds. Like it felt like at one point, like I was like, man, did I drink a bunch of alcohol and have no idea about it? Like it felt like it was just rushing through everything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I noticed that too, especially near the end. Like there was a lot of quick cuts in the beginning and the middle as well, but especially at that ending, it felt like they condensed an ending that was actually meant to be longer into a much shorter time frame.
Yeah.
It could be budget stuff too.
Yeah.
Although it was 45 minutes now, so I mean, you have to be very selective about having other characters that are outside the story and having the main characters in the story, and so you have to be very selective about what you show.
Well, and that's like the slavery subplot didn't really get addressed very well, and even the scabbarousness of those merchants is pretty much just a lark. It seems like if they were gonna take the time to include those guys and not give them the proper attention within the story, that they could have, taken some of the other characters and given them a little more meat. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. They add comic relief, but they actually don't affect the course of what happens much. Like Jerem's subplot with the Pharisees is interesting because it parallels Judas's story and kind of ties in with the action. Like the slave subplot, you could almost take that out and it wouldn't affect the overall effect of the plot.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the point with that is that they had to create some sort of situation where Jerome would be captured and wouldn't be able to warn Jesus.
Right.
And the thing about that is it kept getting to me. Like I kept thinking if they're going to show up and warn Jesus, Jesus is going to be turned around and is like, no, man, this is the plan. Right?
Yeah, fear not.
That might have been better. That might have actually been a better development.
If Jesus says, no, I just like he did in the garden, I'm not looking forward to this, but this is the only way,
Oh,
you have to wonder
if the kid snuck into Garden of Gethsemane. Oh, wow, that would have been an interesting twist.
Yeah.
You have to wonder, like, how much leeway do they have with Jesus scenes? Like, is it okay do they think it's okay to have the kids, witness Jesus, but are they maybe worried about having the kids interact with Jesus that much? Because that creates the problem of, you're creating a fake biblical narrative. Like, this is the problem Superbook had. Superbook had the problem where the kids would interact with Bible characters, and then parents would complain that this is changing the Bible story. So they changed it to have the kids almost completely uninvolved with the Bible plot.
And I would argue
But-
that. I mean, I could see that from Superbook, but at the same time, it's pretty. I mean, you don't have to be very smart to know there weren't any toy robots in the Bible narrative. So,
Right.
Isn't that always a tension? Like, I thought it was funny. I just assumed that this was going to get. I didn't grow up in an evangelical background, so I never knew about any of this stuff. And I just kind of assumed that the kids would be interacting in like almost like a parallel dimension where they wouldn't be allowed to impact the actual gospel narrative. But it was interesting to see, like, Jesus heals the main kid, stuff like that.
well, I mean, that's kind of what I'm talking about, though. Is like that they couldn't have impacted the main biblical narrative, right?
Yeah.
Because
Yeah,
like
that's
even
kind
if
of
they even if they would have gotten there and warned Jesus,
Yeah, theologically they could.
remember what?
Yeah.
Like, but I mean, but even beyond that, like, look at, like, when the temple guard shows up and Judas kisses him on the cheek, and the whole thing, and Peter's like, "You're not taking my Jesus," and he cuts Malchus's ear off. Right? Jesus turns to him and is like, "Honestly, man, what are you thinking? Put your sword away. Just go. Just go. I'll fix this guy. We'll talk about it later, Pete." Right?
One of the
I'm
smartest
obviously taking
things.
some liberties, but
One of the smartest things is they sometimes have the kids there and observing, but not able to change events, which I feel would be like realistic if you're a little kid. Like, you can object to something, but no one's going to listen to you, right? Like, so if you imagine they show up at the garden, right? You could imagine the kid saying, "No, don't take away Jesus," and then Peter actually becomes kind of like a parallel to the kids, where Peter feels the same way. Peter tries to intervene, and Jesus censors him, and then you could have the kids like say, "Well, gee, why did he stop Peter from saving him?" Right? Like, the kids would be powerless to do anything. Peter would be trying to assert that power as an adult, but not even he has the power to do it. And I feel like they did that sometimes throughout the show, like by having Jerem kind of like witness Jesus turning over tables, by having Jerem witness the plot to turn Jesus over to the Romans. I just feel like they could have been a bit more consistent about having that theme, I don't know, to help make Jesus more of a character in their lives, basically. It is a really intelligent solution, I think, to have them witnessing the events but not able to change the events.
Yeah, it should have taken the more Ben-Hur route, where the careful perspective is always on him, and we never see anything that's not Alistair's perspective. That would have been a whole lot better development.
Yeah.
overall,
that would have been an interesting approach to things. Yeah. But...
So I have a follow-up question. Can you name cheesier children's Christian cartoons than this one?
Sure, I can, but I can't think of them at the minute.
Wasn't there a Joseph and his coat of many colors?
Yeah, there was a follow.
DreamWorks
Follow-up to.
See, a lot of the names of those cartoons kind of blend together.
And like anytime I try to think of the Joseph story, I can't remember what they called it, because the only thing I can remember is the Broadway musical, The Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat.
Yeah, it was King of Dreams.
King of
Dreams.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And that suffered from a big budget reduction from Prince of Egypt. Yeah.
Prince of Thieves was, not Prince of Thieves. Prince of Egypt. My goodness. Prince of Egypt was such an outstanding production.
Yeah.
It's a masterpiece.
Isn't that's kind of the gold standard, right? When we think about biblical
as far as it was what, and it's sort of funny, because of the whole thing, but it really was to animation what the Ten Commandments was to historical fiction for its time.
Even to the point of taking some key themes from Ten Commandments. Like, if you watch them side by side, Ten Commandments is a much longer movie, but you can kind of tell that, like, whenever Ten Commandments sort of innovates on the biblical narrative, you can tell that they're saying, okay, we got to Hollywoodize this story, and I would bet that Ten Commandments was a reference point to them to how to Hollywoodize the Moses story.
With lots of creative interpretations and expansions, but trying to keep thematically
Nowhere near as many as that Noah movie, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Oh gosh, yeah.
Oh, wow.
And I didn't watch the Noah movie, but just reading about it, a lot of it wasn't even like biblical, like in terms of it was taken from the Deuterocanonical stuff. So
Yeah,
it was
a lot of creative license went into that one.
There were golems, apparently.
yeah. There,
Yeah, the
think
children
actually-
of the angels and men are giant rocks, apparently.
Children of God. I mean, the children of God are such a fascinating topic because they're hotly debated within Christianity. So,
and by every branch too. I mean, like I've met
Some
people
have
of
merely
every
stated
stripe.
that the children of God were just the good Christian people, descended from Adam, and the children of man were all of Cain's descendants, and they intermingled, and that was the problem.
Yeah.
And there are other people who contend straight up that in that passage they were just straight up talking about angels.
And that's the first thing is called. I think it's called the Sethite hypothesis.
Mm-hmm.
I think is the name for it. I don't know. I think that's too simplistic. The text well.
It's an easy way out.
And also, and not only that, the idea that Seth's descendants were automatically good and Cain's descendants were automatically bad doesn't necessarily make sense.
Nah, it really doesn't.
Especially when you look at Cain's reaction to his punishment, right?
and the fact that God gave Cain a wife.
I don't believe that Cain was entirely unrepentant. I mean, looking at it,
same here.
I know that's
Same
off
here.
topic. That's off topic of the Easter story. I know that, but I don't think he was entirely unrepentant. I think he.
Well, he's still speaking and communicating with God post murder in an intimate way where God's answering his prayer. I tend to think that you're right on that. That's my belief, at least.
Yeah. But I don't necessarily. Anyway, and there's a whole.
Yeah, that's getting
but...
into the theoretical plane. That's that sometimes it's not really something a lot of us, myself included, want to do because it's just like, well, I don't want to say anything wrong.
Yeah. Well, no, eventually,
Yeah.
But is it okay? Is it okay to so in the arts? So maybe this is like a Christianity in the arts question. Like, how much leeway is good leeway for an artist? So if we kind of agree that Prince of Egypt is a really like high standard of art based on a Christian
movie,
story, right? It's a good movie, but it does take its creative licenses. The Noah movie takes creative licenses that feel like it's completely thematically different. Like it's about environmentalism, and the biblical story of Noah is not a '90s environmentalist, Fern Gully movie. So, and how much of that apply? How much of that would apply to like? So maybe like for stuff like the Sons of God, maybe the point of that is if you try to say the Sons of God are a specific thing, you're coming up with an answer to something that's kind of cool because it's mysterious. The Sons of God are almost cool because we don't know exactly what that's referring to. So if you make them rock monsters, you're going off of even like a biblical adaptation into
here's the
weird sci-fi fanfiction.
If you're gonna do something where it's like, okay, that Sons of God passage in Genesis, and everyone's hotly debating it. Well, what if this actually was talking about angels or whatever, and then you made a story about that? I'd actually be kind of okay with that if it wasn't actually about any like actual biblical story, and it made no pretension of being one. And B, it made it clear that this was merely a what-if scenario and not like this is what actually happened.
I feel like X-Men does that. Like X-Men does that with Apocalypse, where they say Apocalypse is the inspiration for the Gospel of John, where they don't say Christianity isn't true, but they're doing like a fantasy idea with a Christian theme. So because it's so fantastical, I can interpret it as fantasy. And I don't have to interpret it as, this is our Bible commentary. We're interpreting the revelation of John as a mutant bad guy with big lips.
Well, I think when you get down to, I don't know if you guys are familiar with the Runaways series, but the spoiler alert on a 20-year-old comic. the big villain of the first story arc are actually the Benaiah Elohim, the Nephilim, who are the thing is that the members, like the runaways' parents, are all cult members. They're like part of this ritual cult to like re-empower the Nephilim so that they can storm the gates of heaven, and then recreate the universe with the cult members as kings of the universe. And so when the kids are runaways, because they're not going to be part of all of that because they think their parents are corrupt.
That's an example of using biblical elements to tell a completely different fantasy story, kind of like making Spawn.
And like nobody, it's like, and Spawn's a good example. Like nobody believes that's a real claim, like a real theological thing. Anybody who does is looking for an excuse to hate the Bible anyway.
For me, as a Reformed Christian, I'm actually more offended by realistic portrayals of Jesus than I would be any kind of like taking another character and making it into a fantasy thing. So, like, as far as I see it, any character in the scriptures that's not God Himself is fair game to have a fictional story with them, you know. But I think obviously be historical figure. You want to be true to who they were as a person.
Yeah,
that's pretty fair.
Yeah, Jesus is the one character you can't have an artistic license on because he's the central character in God Incarnate. You can't really have
you don't want to put words in God's mouth. That's not good.
I'm curious. How do you guys then, maybe like if we each take turns, how do you guys see this in terms of, I guess this would depend on whether you have a personal conviction about representation of Jesus in art or not. How do you guys feel the Easter promise does of having Jesus involved in a story, taking some moderate creative licenses, but trying to balance that with like not coming up with a Jesus fan fiction? So maybe like Fly Fox. Do you feel like the Easter promise goes too far in having Jesus do things that aren't described in the? Oh, we lost Fly Fox. Dang it. Okay, he's back.
He's back.
He was offended by the very questioning.
I was offended. Right. So, would you say the Easter promise goes too far with Jesus doing things that aren't described in the gospel, or do you think it strikes a good balance between having him as a character in a new story, and I don't know, not like they don't have him do anything weird like befriending a dog or anything?
Well, it's my personal conviction. I don't hold anybody else to it that any representation of Christ in a visual medium is a sin. Now, that's my personal conviction. So, but I don't even that's not something that I push on anybody. For instance, we have a nativity set that we put out during Christmas because that's something my wife likes to do. So I'm not a big dogmatic person when it comes to it. So as far as the representation of Jesus, it actually is one of the things that bothered me as a kid was Jesus always seemed so milquetoast. Like he usually has the most bland design. He usually has the most unemotional voice actor. Usually it's sort of a middle tone and very, very low, you know.
Mr. Rogers.
Yeah, exactly. It's Mr. Rogers. And I don't think that's a good. Yeah. I think that so that actually offends me more than out there.
Funny you should mention that, actually, because back when I was a kid, I was also exposed. Do anyone remember the Archaeologist time travel series?
Yeah, The Greatest Adventures of the Bible.
Yeah, The Greatest Adventure.
Yeah, because here's the weird thing, because when I was a kid, I saw those and their presentation. I actually thought, watching all those things, I thought Jesus was just a character in a list of characters, because they're all given this kind of equal prominence in their presentation. And so I actually got the mistake that Jesus was just a character, not the character.
Right.
They're a collection of Bible stories. They don't get too much into the significance of the Bible stories in Greatest Adventure.
Right.
Weird.
Well, it's like I don't know if you guys are what age groups everybody has, but the Story Keepers was a thing when I was, kind of young, and that one sticks out in my mind as being like the perfect example of just like a bland voice actor. Like just every time Jesus appeared on the screen, it was like you were listening to an audio recording of the Bible.
And that was
instead of
actually a
somebody
pretty.
acting.
Yeah, I remember that. I remember fast forwarding the Jesus scenes when I watched Story Keepers, because the Story Keeper stories were very engaging because they're basically trying to survive Roman oppression.
Right. And the central point of it is that they're telling stories about Jesus, but then there's almost no life to those. So I guess I'm sort of this weird contradiction of like, having come to these reformed convictions later in life, like I have all these thoughts from before then where I was always like, man, why isn't Jesus cooler in these? And
can't Jesus be cooler?
As an adult, I'm like, oh man, why are they breaking the second commandment? What are they doing that for?
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, you'd be intruding. You'd be intruding on an area you shouldn't.
Yeah. Right.
So I'm sensing like kind of like, so I'm Reformed also actually, and I kind of come down on the camp that I don't believe in any depiction of the glory of God, like God as transcendent, right? So I couldn't paint the the Transfiguration on the mountain, because in the Transfiguration Christ reveals his glory, and kind of the whole point of the glory of God is that you can't see it. Like Moses gets a tiny little glimpse of it, and according to the Catholic Church, he grows horns, and according to other translations, his face glows for the rest of his life. Right? Like the whole point is that
that's not entirely accurate. That was a bad translation that they've since rescinded. The whole horn thing.
One of the downsides of any kind of visual depiction is that you're always going to be limited by that visual depiction, or what the limitations of what you can do.
Yeah, you'll always be limited to what you understand, and the thing about God, is that He is beyond our understanding.
That's one thing that
it's kind of impossible to truly visually depict Him.
That's one of the things that comes to. I don't know if it comes from any particular religious background on it, but I think that it's an open secret amongst religious artisans, and I think it used to be known better, at least by people that did the art, that you're not actually depicting, Christ in the crucifix, in icons and all that other kind of stuff. It's just it's not the image of the invisible God. It's something that you can sort of kind of begin to get your head around, right? So
you're getting into the iconoclasm.
Exactly. I mean, because that's like, I've got friends who are Greek Orthodox, and I've got some friends that are Catholic, and it comes back to that same kind of stuff where this is short. I mean, it's the same way with like recited prayers. This is the beginning. This is the step one to the understanding that there is something beyond what you can even get your head around. It's not the thing itself. It's the thing that represents the thing that represents the thing.
Yeah, I'm reminded of that line from the movie Luther, where they look at a crucifix where Luther's worried about images and relics, and he still looks at
Zwingli. It was supposed to be Zwingli that was worried about images, and Luther was fine with. He was fine with the idea of images. Luther was concerned about images being confused for idols by basically an illiterate public.
Yeah, he basically said, "Is it really our Lord we worship, or the splinters of the wood and the rust of the nails?"
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Has anyone ever seen The Miracle Maker?
No.
It was a claymation version. It was a claymation / 2D version of Jesus' life, and
I have seen it.
And there are certain points. I think there are limitations in that and what you could do in 2D and like a claymation. But I like the depiction of Jesus in that, because they kind of have they don't make Jesus more monotone. They make him look like a more proper representation of God on earth. Although there are certain types of limitations to that too. But it's one of the better ones, I think.
I mean, there's kind of been like two conversations here. Like there's the kind of basically there's the second commandment question, which I think everybody, even if you whatever side of it you come down on, you at least have to think about it. I think. And then there's also, if you come down that a representation of Jesus wouldn't violate the second commandment, you still have the problem of, is this a proper representation of Jesus? Like, I have the worst Christian cartoon ever. I think it's incredibly obscure, and I would present it as like an example of like everything awful in this kind of thing, that like maybe like as a negative contrast to where I think the Easter Promise is actually doing a pretty good job. What's it called? I don't remember its title, but I remember it involves Jesus befriending a dog as the whole plot of the story.
What?
Marmaduke, was this a personal story?
I didn't know it as a kid. I discovered it as an adult, and I just hated it so much.
I think it's called At Jesus' Side.
At Jesus' Side, that's it. Yeah.
It's like a Dalmatian kind of dog. Yeah, I think it's all the dogs are talking. It's like 101 Dalmatians with Jesus.
Oh no!
Right, and then the dogs have a whole experience of wondering.
That really feels like blasphemy.
The cover image right now is a Jesus hugging the dog with another dog over his shoulder, with a giraffe and an elephant and a iguana, I think.
It's the peaceable kingdom. Oh my god.
Jesus is a Disney princess. He sings the song and all the birds come around.
Dude, I can't believe you even said that. Oh my god.
That would be pretty blasphemous.
I don't think it's blasphemous. It's just so bizarre, like having the animal, the typical animal characters, and trying to have them relate to the Jesus story.
I mean,
there's a porcupine in the story, or a hedgehog.
And that's one of the things. Like, go ahead.
I was going to say, my takeaway is you can be well-intentioned, but if you're not considerate of what you're doing, your art's going to have the opposite effect of your intentions.
I think that's true for all art, whether it's religious or not. Because I mean, all art has to do with deep ideas, with things of. But even interior design has to do with what is comfort, what is home, right? So all art relates to ideas about our existence and ideas about our humanity. If we don't have a really honed worldview, if we just have half-baked ideas about what is life, I think we're going to end up with art that's also half-baked.
By the way, just so you know, Matt C., it looks like you've got your paintbrush or something on your live stream. Don't draw anything sinful.
Oh, it was a WB series where it's like taking like all the world leaders' dogs are become superheroes, and like a superhero. And the dog behind that for some reason.
That's a really good question.
That was a really prominent 80s to 90s thing, but I have no idea if people do it as much anymore.
I feel like CGI is starting to phase it out.
Yeah. There's
contemporary. There's new 2000 teens Superbook has CGI Bible stories. The guy
they're still making Veggie Tales.
Right, Veggie Tales, and one of the guys who was on Veggie Tales felt dissatisfied with it, and I know that he's doing some Christian series that I haven't been following carefully. He wanted to do something that was more explicitly biblical than Veggie Tales was. I mean, there's always going to be a market for it. I just feel like the 80s and 90s in general were big animation decades, and so Christian animation kind of caught that wave.
I think that's probably a fair assessment of that.
Yeah, I only hear about Christian animation when I happen to go by a Christian bookstore, which doesn't happen very often since they're not so few and too far in between.
But we kind of got off topic though, talking about how, what we think about how the Easter Promise does with representing Christ within it, and we kind of, because we got off on the bigger topic of should Christ be represented at all.
Yeah.
So to redirect that around there, I guess I'll give my opinion since I'm the one talking right now. I think it did an okay job, but there were a few key lines of Christ's Passion Week narrative that they changed, and I don't dig it. Right? So, like the whole idea that that there's actually it's two parts of it. On the one side, he said, "This is my Father's house to be a house of prayer, and you've made it a den of thieves." They changed it to a den of merchandise. Those are definitely not the same idea.
Or merchants, I think they said.
Yeah, or in either way, it's definitely not what the text is, right? Thieving is a very different thing than merchandising.
I'm pretty sure I've actually read a Bible translation that has that, but I can't remember which one it was.
I don't. Yeah, I mean that could be. It could be like a Living Bible thing or something too. But
yeah.
But that was the issue. The other side of that too was the next scene, in that he talks about that the court of the Gentiles was to be for all nations, which is a very biblical idea. I guess it's a 1-for-1 on that particular aspect of it.
It's a biblical idea, but it's not in that biblical scene at all.
I don't think so. Yeah.
John 2:16 does refer to as a house of trade or a marketplace.
Okay.
Place of business. But I think this also has to come to the fact that I've seen so many fictional versions of the Jesus story that they're using particular lines, because the line a place of worship for the world does actually exist in the Bible. It's just not the line they tend to use in fiction or in the media presentations.
Right. And that's one thing. I mean, because the real point about the whole reason that the marketplace, that the money changers were driven out of the temple, wasn't because they were changing money, wasn't because of the trade practices, but because they were interrupting the ability for the nations to seek Messiah, right? For the nations to seek communion with God. And that was what Jesus was getting after the Pharisees and the Sadducees about. That's what Jesus was getting after the priestly class about. That's what Jesus was getting after, the all of that stuff was about, the religious elites, keeping people away from God. And that's sort of a big deal. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, and that may have,
that was a bit weird.
And that may not have been. Well, yeah.
And the camels. You realize you commanded us to do this, right?
Well, there actually is a reason for that, because for people who couldn't actually bring the animals with them to the sacrifice area, that was a good place to trade in exchange for it. Because if you sold your animal where you lived and brought them money to buy something there, you could do that as a reasonable trade.
Right. Well, and
my read on that scene is what's specifically bugging Jesus is that it's a house of it's supposed to be a house of prayer. It's supposed to be a holy place, and it's being humiliated or kind of denigrated by all of this going on. They're not recognizing like the specialness of God's house.
If they would have just moved that whole temple business outside of the walls, and left the court of the Gentiles alone, I don't think that would have been like an issue, not just in the story, but in the actual narrative.
Right, and haggling over the price of your sacrifice for your sin right in the temple, probably not the most honoring thing to God.
But especially because the whole point of the court of the Gentiles is like, okay, so you can't come in unless you're a Jew. At this place you can. So if you want to find out what Judaism is about, you come to the temple, ask some Jews, what is up with your God? And that's what the whole point of that outer court was.
Yeah.
Do I hear a little baby running around?
Oh yeah, that's my guy. He's running around the house.
That's awesome. Yeah. Other than that, though, I think they did a fairly decent job of a lot of the portrayal of the Passion story. It was kind of boilerplate. It
Well,
wasn't. I don't think it was terrible.
I think that especially like the crucifixion scene for a children's film was just about as brutal as you could make it without it being gratuitous. You
That's
actually
fair. That's
you
fair.
actually show the hammer being swung down into and as we all know, sometimes what you imagine is going to be more visceral than what is actually depicted. So even showing and suggesting that a hammer is nailing a nail through a wrist or a hand is
not once but twice.
Yeah.
Yeah, they actually
too.
set that up pretty early on.
Yep. The thief in the first act. Well, and like that one was really interesting too, because like they actually had the nail on the dude's wrist before they had. That was just like, how much of this are we gonna see in this cartoon?
I never saw it as a kid, so I wouldn't. Yeah.
They tried to bring that up with repeating the phrase, in a little while you won't see me, and then in a little while you will see me, which I think is basically it's a paraphrase of a biblical quote. But I think it's following the intention of the real quote, but simplifying the language a little. So there,
16,
I think
right?
that sounds right. Yeah. So it's maybe like the same problem we talked about earlier, where Jesus isn't much of a character, but watching it as an adult, I definitely picked that up. Watching it as a kid, I think the only thing I picked up was I didn't like the crucifixion scenes in particular. So I probably wasn't looking. Kids may, in general, not be looking for subtext. They might be looking, kind of like the plain meaning of the story.
I remember as a kid. I remember watching it as a kid, kind of wishing, "Oh, please!" I actually, as a child, I actually thought, "Oh, please hurry, please save Jesus." To the kids, like, go and warn him.
Right. There's a.
Right. Though I feel like that's got to be your first impression, no matter what. Like even to an adult, listening to the story. Augustine talked about this, where Augustine thought it was crude the first time he read the Bible, and then he'd keep returning to the Bible over and over again, and then he'd start picking up on the foreshadowing and the layers of meaning. But I feel like to a child or to an adult encountering it the first time you just pick up like the basics. He died, he came back, and then it takes a while for you to the significance to get you.
That's one thing that they talk about with like a lot of like missions to tribal groups, especially people that are outside of the Western sphere altogether. They're presenting the gospel to them, like the idea that Jesus doesn't he's this great king, obviously, and that he can be betrayed and that he can be conquered is something that people like have a hard time getting their head around. If they've been going through the gospel from the beginning, he's risen his place, he's gathered people around him, he's got faithful followers, and the idea that he can even be defeated is a shock to a lot of people hearing it for the first time. And I think some of us who grew up in the West or grew up in that narrative, I mean, and Matt, you kind of came to faith as an older fellow. I mean, I was basically raised in a church, right? So it's a different, maybe a different situation for me. But when you were, really ingesting the story of Christ, what was your take on that? Okay. Okay.
Ooh.
Right.
Which ironically it's something that Jesus censored the disciples for. Like, you guys have read the Bible, you're supposed to know who the Messiah is, and you do have to do like a lot of reading of the tough books like Leviticus and Deuteronomy to get some of what's going on. Like, one of the amazing things about the Gospels is they speak to a Gentile who's not familiar with this stuff at one level, but then the understanding Judaism adds a lot of, I don't know, like extra deeper significance to it.
And a lot of that stuff, like Matthew is very Jewish, right? I mean, like it's written in Greek, but it's written to a Jewish audience. This is our king. By the way, we killed him, but he's tougher than that. And so that's one of the great things about that. But it's also, I guess, one of the things for me, and this is coming from like the an essentially Southern Baptist tradition, was the idea that the real historicity of the Bible, the real visceralness of the body of Christ, right, like, was so present. So for me, like, I was worked at church camps for years, and I would tell people a verbal story of the Passion before the movie came out, and like, I'm telling you, the movie was not as bloody as it should have been. Right? I had some pacing issues with the Via Dolorosa specifically, but in terms of structure, but like the scourging was not as violent as the real scourging was, right? Oh yeah, it wasn't. It wasn't. I mean, Isaiah says that he was not recognizable as a human.
Yeah.
So the fact there was skin left on Vasil's face was chances are unlikely about that being. They ripped his beard out, man. I mean, I know you don't really carry a big beard on you, but I have from time to time, and it would not go well.
The fact that Jesus died quickly actually was somewhat unusual, because of the severity of the beating. Like, part of the point of the crucifixion was to create an agonizing spectacle of you. So
if people survived a scourging, they usually would live 3 or 4 days on a cross. So,
and then there's also the theological point of Christ giving up his life, it not being taken from him, him giving it up, not only in delivering himself up to be crucified, but also saying, Father, into thy hands I commend my spirit. He's giving up his life. They didn't take it from him, even to the point of when he chooses to die.
Mm-hmm.
Well, like the exact moment that he gives up the ghost, so to speak.
And he even said that was happening ahead of time, right? And people still didn't get it. And that's one of the things I come back to, is I don't think the disciples were stupid. I don't think the disciples, that Jesus didn't prepare them ahead of time for what was going on. I just think the idea that someone they loved so much could be taken from them thusly was so outside of their ability. They just didn't want to believe, right? So like, I for a long time I had thought that when the disciples ran from the Romans in the garden, that it was just fear that kept them away from the cross, and only John went back because he was brave enough. I think it was grief. I think they knew that Christ would be dead, and there just was no more hope left. And John,
these are guys that would have
couldn't let go.
Are guys that would have.
I don't think it was. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, these are guys that would have seen crucifixions their entire lives. They would have seen these brutal murders and executions over and over and over again. And to see God, the person that they believe to be God, up on the cross, that's a stumbling block to every Jew, including the ones that love Jesus. They don't want to go see that. Here they feel at the lowest point.
Yeah, when Peter, his first impression when he hears about the crucifixion is, "Oh God, Jesus, that will never happen. I won't let that happen."
Yeah.
None of them were.
Peter especially struggled with that to the point of boasting that he wouldn't let it happen, and then in real time finding out that wasn't the case.
Well, then we do that now. We think like, oh well, if I was there, deep down, I would have went to the cross, and it's like, man, I can't even read my Bible every day. Am I really to believe that I would have followed Jesus to the cross and possibly be recognized as one of his followers and have the same thing happen to me?
We have the luxury of hindsight.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the thing is, we also, I mean, like, Jesus told everybody what was going to happen, but once again, Jesus had repeatedly said, well, I'm going to give you the sign of Jonah, by the way. 3 days dead, I'm back. Right? And nobody understood him. He specifically said, I'm going to be in the belly of the earth, and then I'm not. and his resurrection came as a surprise, because I just think it was so far outside of their concept, they wouldn't believe it. And I don't think Thomas doubted because Thomas wasn't a faithful guy. I think Thomas doubted because he wouldn't let himself believe something so crazy. Because he's just like, no, man, there's just this is so far outside of reality. It's a world breaking event, and you're wanting to believe, you just buy that the world's broken.
Yeah.
Also think that
in all the depictions of Thomas, I never get the depiction that he's just down for the sake of telling you, he just can't believe that. No, that's not true. I'll only believe it when I put my finger in his side.
Yeah. One, I think it was just that he at the risk of stirring a pot here, what they lacked was the audacity to hope that things could be as good as that. The world, that the universe is as big as they want. I think in some cases that they wanted it to be. And so, when Jesus shows up not dead anymore, that's a world-changing thing. I mean, it really is. I mean, think about it, right? We're sitting here, and this is one thing I get crazy about. People sometimes say, if Jesus made all these crazy claims, why didn't everybody write it down? Why didn't everybody know it? And I'm like, dude, what are the chances that you would ever hear a story about a homeless former carpenter on the other side of the world, from 2,000 years ago? They did tell everyone. That's how you've heard the story.
Fedora arguments.
Yeah.
Never mind that Jesus willfully wanted it to keep it secret for a long time. Tell no one.
Yeah.
I just realized something. Are there any movies that depict the 3 days of Jesus' death between his death and resurrection?
Yes, there is one. I'm gonna forget the name of it. Hang on, it's in the other room. I'll be right back.
Because for me, that's I would like to see that, because I haven't seen that one. So seeing those whole 3 days play out between is really illustrating the time. Because in the Bible, all we do is just jump to the death and jump to 3 days later to really pound on you.
Especially in this one where it was a minute later.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't even think they. Now that I think back on that movie, they never even specified or pointed out that 3 days had passed.
No.
It just kind of happens.
Right. Well, and I feel like, well, I mean, I think a part of it depends on. Well, I think some of it has to do too with the person's perspective you're telling it from, right? It's like the whole point of the Emmaus, right? The stranger on the road to Emmaus scenario, where one of the disciples who isn't named is just depressed and he's walking away and he meets this guy and they start talking about the events of the day and it's like, oh man, and they killed Jesus. That really stinks. And then Jesus incognito goes through Moses, goes through David, goes through the prophets, and tells him this had to happen. And oh, by the way, he's also God. In case you hadn't figured that out, oh man, you're confirming all these things I hope were true. And man, he's if he raises from the dead, and then Jesus goes to bless the bread, and then he reveals himself and vanishes, right?
Yeah.
So you have this thing where like that man's perspective was the total. That disciple, whoever he was, his perspective was a total reveal, right? Where somebody had basically a parlor room scene to explain the mystery at the end of it all, and that was that guy's super dramatic story, right? But for those of us who come to the story, in its completion, right? Well, of course we see it was always had to be that way, and that glorifies God. But the people that experienced it without knowing that it was going to turn out that way or believing that it could turn out that way still glorified God in the thing. So,
Yeah, I'm having a weird glitch where I'll pick up the day.
Yeah. It never works that way. It never works that way.
Yeah, the only people who end up watching it for the most part tend to be Christian.
That's probably true, but in terms of the things, but I wouldn't say it never works. Because like when you think about like specifically the Passion, right? Thousands of people saw the Passion, millions of people saw the Passion just because Mel Gibson made it, right?
Catholics in general have had a art focus since the Council of Trent, like on purpose.
Yes,
you Protestants object to the image of Christ. We're going to make as more triple images of Christ. Yeah. with weird exceptions like Rembrandt kind of becoming the prototypical Protestant artist. It's kind of interesting to me that Rembrandt's
the only guy I allow to draw Christ and get away with it.
Well, that's very gracious of you, Fly Fox.
Well, Rembrandt deliberately went to Jewish quarters looking for Jews to draw. Yeah, so And so even though his portrait looks like kind of like the standard image of Christ, you can tell Rembrandt thought, okay, I'm going to find something as close as I can get to the original. He was completely fascinated in collecting historical objects. Like Rembrandt as an artist was more, I want to try to recreate this. You know, sometimes there would still be historical inaccuracies, of course, but you could tell he was on purpose trying to find props and things to draw that would make it as realistic as possible. And the Catholic approach was more, we explicitly want to put our peculiarly Catholic doctrines symbolically within the art.
Yeah, well, and I mean, right. Well, and the Catholics have a whole theology of beauty, and what that means in the relation of truth to beauty, which I don't think is entirely inaccurate, but I think they lean a little too heavy into it, frankly. But
well, even in the Passion, you have these diversions into the Stations of the Cross that are
right.
Extra, they're outside of text, and so like even in that you can see the approach to it was certainly a Catholic one. And my biggest problem,
I think
sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, they also have, I think, Christ getting his face sponged off, which would be the origin of like the Catholic relic of the cloth that's supposed to contain Christ's image. Like there are things that are not biblical, but are a part of Catholic art history imagery in the Passion. That's what I was saying.
There are also things that were taken from the like visions that like medieval nuns and stuff had too, like the presence of Satan taunting Christ during the scourging and stuff like that.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Huh.
Well, I mean, and that was very much part of Mel Gibson's perspective. I mean, he talked about it a lot. That I mean, it wasn't strictly evangelical, but it was explicitly glorify Christ by making something that the rest of the world wants to see, even if it's not. Yeah, even if it wasn't. Well, and it wasn't necessarily evangelical in the sense that, like, I hope people come in to believe in Jesus. It's more that, that Jesus deserves the attention of the world, and I make movies. So I'm going to make this amazing movie that will draw people to pay attention even if they don't believe. So, and he's pre-Vatican II also. So that's
He doesn't think there's a pope. Yeah.
He's old school. And all that means. But yeah, the movie I was talking about earlier that talks about the days between, it's called Risen, with Joseph Fiennes in it, and it's from the perspective of a centurion, the centurion that oversaw the crucifixion, and what it is when on Sunday, and it starts Friday night, after the crucifixion, and there's all these rebellions going on, and Joseph Fiennes plays a centurion who's like, most of his job is quelling rebellion in Jerusalem, and he's sent to oversee the end of this crucifixion. And it's very not dramatic overly much. It's just a day in the life, kind of a job thing. And then he gets a call Sunday morning that the body's gone missing. And so it's at that point it becomes like a first century police procedure where he's tracking down people that claim to have heard or known what might have happened to this body that went missing. And
I haven't seen this one.
It's really good. There's a couple of cheesecake moments. Well, anyway, not to spoil things too much, because at the end of the second act, he finds Jesus in the upper room with the disciples, and busts in to expect to find the body face to face with the risen Christ, and then like his whole world. I'm getting goosebumps thinking about it. I love this movie. He just like walks away from his charge, and he like follows Jesus like for the next 40 days until the ascension. All of that time, it truncates it. But that's what's implied, is that he's just there until like Jesus is gone and like he's the whole world shaken. So it doesn't. Fly Fox, you might not like it because it does take place in time that is not specifically mentioned in Scripture, and Jesus is an active character in those times. But I don't think he's out of character with the thing. And especially one of the big things that I love about the portrayal is that is that Jesus is very, not very, but it seems somewhat amused at this is how it had to be, right? And he's always got this look in his eye, he knows something that people are kind of having a fun watching people figure it all out. And Simon Peter is a big character in it, has a much larger role, and is kind of the voice of the believer to the voice of the skeptic. And Finney's plays the skeptic. I was like, can't believe what I'm seeing. And Peter's like, we can't believe it either. Isn't it amazing?
Oh, Draco Malfoy's in this movie.
Oh yeah, that is him. He's the younger. I forgot about that. He's the younger. He's grown up now. I didn't notice him. Didn't recognize him. He plays the guy who's lobbying for Josephine's job. Josephine goes missing. Yeah. I really enjoyed it. I really, really enjoyed it.
All right, it's on my list now.
And part of it is I really like police procedurals. So the idea of taking that like detective story and putting it into the story of Jesus, so it runs adjacent. And one of the other fun things is one of the people that they round up to ask questions of is Andrew. And Andrew's just the guy they have playing him. He's just giddy with joy. He's just full of he basically seems full of nonsense because he's just so overjoyed about having discovered the risen Christ. So it's neat. It's a neat thing. It's a neat take on it. It did not get a lot of press. It came out the same year that Samson movie did that I didn't watch, but so it's pretty recent.
That Samson movie is the greatest thing ever made. We have to watch it. It's amazing, dude.
I haven't seen it. I bought it. I haven't watched it yet.
Believe it or not,
Yeah.
Well, there's the movie called Peter and Paul that was a mini series in the '80s, and it has Anthony Hopkins as Paul, and it's the greatest Christian film ever made. Yeah,
that's interesting.
It's seriously one of my favorite movies ever, and it's a lot of the dialogue and the things that they say is straight out of Scripture, and it's pretty faithful, and it's pretty legit. I mean, it has Anthony Hopkins in it, John Rhys Davies, a bunch of people that you'll recognize. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, and especially
I think that's probably fair.
Especially with Paul, you're getting a wealth of motivation and knowledge about who he was as a person and his inner feelings, and I mean, I think that's like an actor's dream.
Anthony Hopkins once played Apostle Paul.
Yeah, we were just talking about that.
Oh yeah, that's the series Fly Fox referenced. Yeah.
I did not know that either.
Yeah,
have you guys seen the two? Okay, have you guys seen the two recent Bible series that came out? There was the Bible in AD a few years ago, and then there's a new one coming out right now, and the title escapes me, but it's like the biggest budget Bible series of all time. Great.
Oh yeah, I remember the mini series that was just simply called The Bible. I didn't like that one.
That was very fan fiction-y, I think. So
that's the one that Downey did the producing on.
Sorry. Oh, I heard someone say something about producing.
I was thinking, is that the Bible miniseries, was that the one that Roma Downey produced? And her husband?
Yes.
No.
Yes, it is. And her husband is the guy that produced Survivor. I forget his name.
I hate that show.
No, I've never seen the Bible thing. Like I said, I don't usually watch a lot of that stuff. So
I don't like it. So I guess something that got referenced is artistic direction, evangelical purpose, and maybe like teach the kids something purpose. And something that's always bugged me is sometimes I'll see a piece of Christian art that does a good job at one of those things, but never all of those things. Like for me personally, I've never read like a comic book adaptation of the Bible where I think the changes are effective. Like I'm of the opinion that kids are smarter than we think they are. So if you give them the tough language, they may not pick up every word, but they're smart enough to kind of figure out the thrust of it. So you don't need to dumb it down.
I actually have seen a comic that did that.
Okay.
And what it was, I don't remember the name of it. I don't have access to it anymore, so I can't really talk about it in specifics. There was a comic series that my grandmother found when I was like 7 or 8, and they were done up. It wasn't like it was supposed to be like direct retellings of Bible stories. It was kind of humorous, right? So it was kind of the storybook versions of Bible stories, but it got the narrative across really well. And so it was kind of like one of those things where I understood the plot points. So when I went back to read, and they were like things like the Kings and the books of the Judges and things like that, like Old Testament history mostly. And then when I went back and read like in Samuel or Chronicles or whatever else, since I knew where it was going and I had a basic intro of the characters, they weren't just like, they weren't just like words on a page. They weren't just like names that didn't have any relation to me. Like, Jehoshaphat was somebody that I could relate to, and I understood Ahab and things like that. That I don't know that I necessarily would have in the same way. And it was just like a children's book, but it was sequential,
Yeah.
So
the first comic I ever drew, before those dirty Calvinists corrupted me, was actually an adaptation of like the crucifixion story, and I haven't thought about that in years. But I remember drawing that, and like, yeah, I must have been in high school.
I remember drawing a picture of Jesus, and I wrote, "The nails hurt, but he's happy because he knows he's going to rise again," on it in my kid letters.
That's such a marm.
The nails must have hurt. I don't think anything else hurt that bad.
That's the very, yeah. I mean,
I felt like I had to justify why Jesus was smiling on the cross, so I wrote the explanation.
A little weird, but at the same time, how is it? The glory that was set before him, endured the cross, despising the shame.
I guess my closing thought on the Easter promise would be, I actually admire it for attempting to make something that's a quality piece of children's, animation entertainment. I think that's like the missing dimension. Like some people focus so much on the doctrinal correctness part of it. I think they forget the make art part of it. And then for Hollywood, I think the problem is there's let's make a crazy work of art aspect to it, and then they just go off into La La Land, and either they make something that just doesn't quite either they make something that's directly heresy, or if it's not directly heretical, it's at least a little weird and hard to approach as a Christian. So I feel like one route for a Christian artist is just make art that won't run you into these problems. Like set it in Narnia, and then try to express your Christian faith in Narnia, and you don't have some of these problems.
See, that's the approach I definitely favor.
Yeah,
me too.
But if you do set it in the Bible, you're going to have this. I also have to have a Sunday school teacher hat on, and I don't think that necessarily means you won't be a great artist as you make it, but you are going to have to take seriously both the both like the catechism part of it and the art part of it. And I think the balance of that is really tough because it requires really careful thought and work in two fields.
Go the Ben-Hur route.
Yeah, it references it, but not. It alludes to the events, but they don't directly intercede. It's not a Bible story. It's a story set during Bible times.
One of the most interesting, and this is a real bunny trail. If you mind me ending the show with one, any of you guys seen the movie Hail Caesar?
No.
With the comedy, right?
Yeah, it was definitely it was a comedy about the golden age of Hollywood.
Oh yeah,
and communists, and it was the Coen brothers really like get the lampoon communist Hollywood, and it was amazing. The MacGuffin of the movie is that the studio that they work for, I can't remember the dude's name right now. They're trying to make a movie about Jesus that uses the centurion at the foot of the cross as the Ben-Hur type character, right?
Oh, George
Clooney.
It's like The Road, right? But it's George. Yeah. So that's the whole premise, is that they're doing like the Robe thing, right? And meanwhile, this guy is getting up with all these crazy communists and whatever else. The one of the interesting things about it is that Josh Brolin plays the enforcer for the studio, whose job is controlling the vices of these evil people that make movies.
Wait, so
they
you're
can
saying,
make.
so you're saying he's the one that keeps everything in balance?
Yes.
Is that what you're saying?
And so that they're yeah, he is. Well, he's marginally faithful. He's faithful, but he's faithful. He's very Catholic. Goes to confession. He believes it. He doesn't understand it or study it, but he believes it. So there. So, but yeah, one of the best scenes in the movie is he brings in this ecumenical group, right? And so they've got a Protestant, a Catholic, a Greek Orthodox, and a rabbi, and they're talking about the portrayal of Christ, how serious they're taking it, that they don't want to offend anyone and they want to be faithful to the faith traditions that are there. And it's a hilarious scene. It's one of those things too, where you're talking about the balancing the Sunday school lesson with the the catechism book with the film, with the art. And that was the thing, I think, that it wasn't just a plot point in the movie. It was a plot point in the movie because it's something that was really done, right? And we had those movies like Ben-Hur and The Robe and the Ten Commandments, where people were, understood that the viewing public took it seriously. But I don't know if the viewing public takes it that seriously anymore. But I don't think that negates the importance of the artist needing to be that editorial voice for himself. Because if we as Christian artists are taking our faith seriously, and the things we do, are hopefully our effective work and sacrifice to the Lord, right? We want it to be. I know, and even in my silly superhero stories, I think all stories are metaphor, and so when I'm talking about superpower teenagers, I'm really talking about what is life and what is our position in that, and what does free will mean, and all that kind of stuff. It's not just a.
I think the word you're looking for is edifying.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't realize I was looking for it, but yeah, you're right.
I actually had a word for that. I wanted to, earlier years ago, I had invented the term edifatainment, although I'm not sure if that applies anymore.
Yeah. That's fun. I like it. I don't think anyone would understand it, but I like it.
Edifatainment.
I put that up with catastrophe for good palindromes.
Yeah.
No, that's not what a palindrome is. What is it? What is it when you put two words together to make a new word? That is palindrome.
Portmanteau.
Portmanteau. That's it.
Which actually, well, that's a derailing. Portmanteau has a fun word origin that I can tell you a story about some other time. Totally off topic.
Hmm.
A little higher. A little higher.
And I think there's
No. Right.
I'm reminded of what when the atheist person said on an offhand topic about artwork when we talked about Star Wars. He said the reason, like he's talking about the Star Wars new series, and he says the primary reason why religious entertainment doesn't work is because it lacks, and here's a liberal word, authenticity. It lacks that certain creative spark that all creative works need.
well, except that I don't think that's necessarily true. I mean,
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think even like you I don't know if any of you guys. I know we're trying to wrap up, but have any of you guys seen the Flywheel movie? That was the first movie that I can't remember the name of the church that did like Fireproof. Whatever.
I hear about it.
Yeah. It wasn't good, but it was really sincere.
Yes.
Right? It was super authentic, but it wasn't very good. I mean, the acting wasn't good, the cinematography wasn't good, the film stock wasn't good, the lighting wasn't good, the makeup wasn't good, the plot was intriguing, but the story wasn't good. But it's also super on the nose. And suffers
that's
from
the problem with a lot of Christian movies.
Well, and like a lot of Christian movies, they pull all the stops out for the super happy ending, right?
I noticed that.
Like with Risen, pretty much got a super happy ending, sort of, kind of. This Easter story has a pretty happy ending, because it ends with Christ.
Yeah, it wouldn't make sense for it to not have a happy ending,
And I mean, and I think part of the payoff. I think part of the payoff is it's very focused. And second of all, you have, just before the end, like the crucifixion scene is it's heavy. It's heavy stuff. And a lot of Christian movies won't get into the real gritty of it all.
Yeah.
And that's the part that I think that they miss out on, is because they won't lay the stakes as heavy as they need to be. To make you got to earn a happy ending, man. You got to, or it's just a comedy, and you can't take anything seriously.
Like, this might be a problem with the Christian Hollywood complex in general. Flyfox would know this, but Apologia has covered how once Hollywood figured out they could make money on Christian films, then there kind of became a cottage industry of, like Hollywood makes formulas of how to make movies when they think they can make money off of something, right? So then God, not only is there like a God's Not Dead, but then there becomes a cottage industry of making more God's Not Deads at over and over and over again after that. So that's a careful thing where, like, there's also like a secular world that recognizes they can make art and make money too doing this, which, sometimes that means we can get like a DreamWorks saying, hey, let's make a really good Moses movie, right? But there's like what am I trying to say? It's not like it's bad if an atheist or like just maybe like a studio that doesn't have a religious affiliation wants to make religious art. It's just a caution that, they can have good art or bad art coming from the secular realm as well. So don't get caught up in, I don't know, like the secular, this is how things are done in Hollywood ways of doing things necessarily.
Well, to get into, like, Christ being king over all things, God, all truth being God's truth, because because he made it to be so. Whatever is true and beautiful is true and beautiful because God made it to be, regardless of who makes the art. So that should motivate Christians to be like, how about I be true and beautiful in my art and not worry about, well, is this going to appeal to my Christian audience or not? But how about just be true and beautiful in your art and let that shine through, because that's honoring to God as much as is thinking that a Jack Chick track is going to be the next big thing. Don't get me wrong, I'm a big Jack Chick fan, but
yeah, and I think that's a big thing. We've talked about this on my religion streams I've done on my channel a lot too. Is the idea that subtext of art is not always apparent to the patron.
Yeah.
But that we need to make sure as artists and creators that we are building that subtext authentically. The background that we do ahead of time, and the fact that if we are serious about our faith, that we're living our faith into our art. And then, just like in nature, God is in charge of the increase. I don't think we want to hide our light under a bushel, but we shouldn't light people on fire either,
Well, we live in a world where Pilgrim's Progress has already been written, so therefore, let's try to do something different. Like you can't beat the best. So
that's a good point.
I never knew what a big deal Pilgrim's Progress. Well, like I got an edition of it where like the scholar explained what a widely printed book it was basically standard reading for a few generations of people, like Little Women.
That's underselling it, Marm. It was a couple hundred years.
Right.
Oh yeah, that's been recently remade.
You had a copy of that and a copy of the Bible.
Oh yeah, the Pilgrim's Progress has been recently remade into a 3D animated movie.
I saw it. Yeah, I was a little worried by the quality of the animation, but I'd be up for, I don't know, like live reaction streaming that sometime. They'd actually probably be a lot more sensitive about.
I'm glad to have read that entire book. It was a good one.
So I think that movie is available for free on Redeem TV, which is a free app from partly sponsored by the Christian History. If you guys want to do a watch.
Oh, we lost Fly again. Mid-sentence.
Dang.
I think
it just keeps happening.
Yeah.
There he is.
We might have to do a thing where we do like a riff tracks, a setup where instead of showing it the thing, we just go ahead and say, when you see this happen, start your copy.
Yeah. So if I could just give my closing thoughts on the movie we watched today. As far as the importance of being earnest, if you will, they clearly had a desire to make a quality product. Obviously, I made jokes about the animation lacking and things like that, but budget matters, and I think you can tell the quality of it by the backgrounds, hand painted backgrounds with where the perspective of the backgrounds was dead on. Clearly a talented artist was doing those. They were putting time into those, and they put a lot of effort into it. And I think that speaks to the intentions of the artist. So the theology was good here and there. And while I have my disagreements with the concept in general, if you're gonna do it, at least do it quality. If you're gonna sin, make it a good sin, right?
Boldly to quote Luther. Good.
Yeah.
I sense a debate. I sense a debate stream topic for a future series. All right.
Yeah.
Pull out. Okay, let me pull out my copy of the Council of Trent. We're gonna redo the whole Reformation right now.
Well, if we do that, we've got to make sure we invite some Catholics.
Right.
I mean, we're an all Protestant group, so it doesn't really, and then we can have some
the entire time.
If you have some an Orthodox guy on the sidelines to just shake his head at both of us. So. Yes, that's very true.
Right. But we have the truth on our side. And a bunch of offensive Luther quotes.
Okay. I'm going to just go ahead and say that I'm not convinced of that. I would rather be on truth's side than have truth on my side.
Oh, Jesus, Juke, eh?
I mean, this is, I'm just getting tangential. I'm firmly Protestant, but I'm not going to pretend that I am right. I believe I am, but I'm not going to pretend that I am. You know what I mean?
I'm just passive aggressive about it. I'll just super chat them the entire 95 theses so they can't be mad.
I don't know if that's comes from not being reformed. But yeah, you know, just probably.
Right.
But no, I just I was very nearly a recognized Calvary Chapel minister. So that's the fellowship I'm most closely theologically.
Well, I was a deacon at a Reformed Baptist church, so what you gonna do about that? Ugh.
Yes. His mute still muted. Maybe he left to go somewhere. Could be, and he's not even here yet.
All right, I'm back. So you want my insight on it?
Yes.
I thought it was okay-ish. The stuff that the parts of the movie that were more or less closer to the actual biblical accounts, I liked that stuff. The stuff with the kid when, you know, isolated from the grander narrative, I think that was all right-ish. As much as the slavery subplot had absolutely nothing to do with the movie, I actually liked those like two dopey bad guy characters. They were funny. They were really animaniacs, and that's actually kind of really out of place in this otherwise ostensibly serious story, but
yeah.
They were fun. That's really just about all I can say on the matter, to be honest.
That makes sense. Like, some of it is like evaluating something on its own merits and then evaluating it like compared to something else. Like, this is miles ahead of some really cringy children's animation, but you know, like being a solid. It's like the difference between solid and great. Like something solid, you know.
Yeah.
It's an admirable effort, but I think greatness, it has to maybe like I think what defines greatness is what can you take away from it that is so powerful, like it almost like makes you want to make something powerful to continue expressing that. Like maybe there's an idea in there that was there and was brilliant, but that hasn't even like the idea like sparks other ideas. I don't know. That just I'm dangerously close to getting into like my hour-long art history lecture, so I'll stop.
Yeah. There's just tons of material here that you just gotta not talk about.
Yeah.
I could get you to watch Angel Wars. That was a thing that existed.
Oh, yes.
I remember. That's something I do remember from childhood.
It sounds really awful, like Bible Man awful.
Let's see, for us 90s
it's
kids,
better
you
than
have to-
Bible Man. I can at the very least say that. But it looks like a PS1 cutscene.
Oh, that's hard. already.
It looks like a good quality Square Enix PS1 cutscene, but still looks like a PS1 cutscene.
like Final Fantasy VII kind of thing, huh?
Yeah, more like Final Fantasy VIII's CG cutscenes, but yeah.
All right, so we can have as many Second Commandment violations as Fly Fox Pro can possibly stand. We'll just keep throwing them at him.
Angel War is weird because it's this weird halfway point between being its own thing and practically just being a fantasy series that kind of has allegories. But then they kind of throw that out the window, and the characters are explicitly called angels, and they try to these are biblical angels. And it's just like they have spaceships. It's just like yeah, they got this cool armor. It's just like yeah, it just doesn't work when you try to make these characters actual biblical angels. It doesn't make sense.
Is anyone familiar with the comic book series Archangels, the saga from the 90s?
Oh yeah, I
read that.
I was just going to not mention it because we're trying to wrap up, but yeah.
That was very 90s.
Yeah.
Very, very 90s. Have like
Oh, nice.
Yeah, it's as 90s as you can get, and it even has the Holy Spirit as a superhero.
Yeah, that
Oh,
gets
my.
into some
that's problematic.
dubious
Problematic.
territory right there.
Yeah, that's not okay. That's not okay.
The whole point is that he's non-locational.
Yeah,
Maybe that's not the whole point, but it's a point.
Yeah, you're looking at actual X-Men there.
Yeah.
No, you'll find it. It's definitely once you find it, you'll see.
The saga. Archangel's the saga. Yeah.
the demons look like they're straight out of Spawn. I remember that. That was,
Yes.
Oh, it's
it's very 90s.
The need to probe more of this Unitarian but once again,
Did Unitarians have any weird specific cartoons or anything? A cartoon about how Jesus is a really good person.
were you guys okay? One actual question, Matt. Were you guys Unitarian Universalists? Because wow.
Wait.
I just have such a hard time even getting my head around the Unitarian position. I mean, just like the Bible's so blatant. I can't even understand reading the Gospels from a Unitarian position. I mean, it's just like yeah, that I guess it makes sense. I'm just saying, like the Jehovah's Witness reading of the New Testament makes more sense to me than the Unitarians understanding the New. They're pretending they're getting in the Greek, but that's a different.
I'm
Yes.
Yeah, I think that's probably true in all churches. I mean, you get to look. Like I've been doing a lot of listening to the debates down at Speaker's Corner in London, unless, and I mean, and of course, everybody, not everybody, but the subject of the Crusades comes up a lot, right? And yeah, oh my gosh, yeah, those guys. I can't. It's across the ocean. No, I'm just like seriously when people are talking about that whole thing and the ideas, like so much of the impetus for much of the Crusades has in the beginnings there was legitimacy behind it because of the political environment.
Yep.
But also like there was also this canonization of awfulness to justify what could be argued as needful military action. And instead of resting upon, a true just war theory and everything else, it just went, crazy on it. And so that's one of those things I think that once Christians weren't, and I think it's probably true in other societies too, but in terms of in Europe, once Christians weren't being hunted down and murdered and suddenly could attain political authority, I think that this pull between the world and Christendom was a very real thing. I mean, you even go back to what was going on in the stuff surrounding the Gunpowder Rebellion, right? And in Britain and the 30 Years' War and all that kind of stuff, the really, really bloody parts of the Reformation, right? You had, different kinds of Protestants and Protestants and Catholics and, everybody just like burning each other at the stake as heretics. Like that's absolutely, no reading of the Bible justifies that. None.
I mean, they had such a different worldview than us. It's a little unfair. Like everybody was killing everybody, Christian and non-Christian alike.
Yeah, no, I mean, I there definitely is an argument to that, and then the whole thing that the idea that that's why America didn't want to have a nationwide religion, want to have a nationwide denomination, so that the nation could be unified, in a different way, So I get it, that was just the way things were done. I get it that it was just the way things were done, but at the same time, I mean, you can't, we're a creedal faith. You can't go to the creed and find anywhere to justify that.
It's like talking about slavery. Like there is a objective truth outside of us where you can say slavery is objectively wrong as a moral absolute, and then but then there's also this dimension where I think people with a narrow, focus on Twitter, what's going on Twitter today, they'll know that slavery is wrong, but they won't know why, and so they'll scream, George Washington was a slave owner, right? But they don't have like enough context to say anything about slavery because they basically live in 2020. Basically, that's basically the point I'd make about the Reformation. Is you're right, but also like be careful not to. I don't know, like would we be better if we were raised in that time period, basically?
And yeah, absolutely, and that's 100% true. But it's just one of those things. Like, I recently watched the BBC miniseries Gunpowder, about the Gunpowder Rebellion, right? And it is brutal and hard, and it grieved me because nominally Protestant, like government officials were hunting down, and it's just true. We're hunting down Catholics, and a big part of that had to do with because of the way what happened under Mary, right? Mary, that whole thing, because she was hunting down Protestants during her brief time on the throne, and it all kind of came out. That there still were bad feelings about all of that, and it's a real messy thing, and it's normal. I actually believe it was prophesied. It doesn't mean that it's okay, and it's hard. It's hard to come to face that, and to realize that, the story of humanity is one of facing the image of God in our fellow humans. That's that's true. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of that is, I think that the society works under the same framework we saw active within the life of Paul, right? Where at the beginning of earlier in his career, he's spending time defending and it needed to happen. Earlier in his career, he's spending time in his epistles defending his apostleship. At the end of his life, he's talking about how, oh, by the way, I am also the greatest of sinners. And fully leaning upon the grace of Christ, because that is, I think we all, I think that is, it is. And I think that's one of the things that believers individually go through, is realizing as we grow closer to the image of Christ, I think we have to understand how far away how much farther away we were, and how far away we still are, is we are poor. It's like, it's 1 Corinthians. I think it's 1 Corinthians. God revealed this glory in clay vessels, that we will know that His power is from God and not from us. Right? That we're just, we're just dirt, because He is so surpassingly great. And I think we as believers, and through the revelation of the Spirit in our lives, and through understanding Scripture, we progressively understand that more and more and more. I think that is reflected in society as well, in a certain sense, where just as science itself is built upon the discoveries of previous generations, I think society, if it reveals more about moral discoveries, and in ways that the moral universe becomes more apparent generation to generation. The problem is that I think that we're in a place right now where we believe, because we know more about the moral law, that we've attained the moral law as a society. There's no humility to understand that we are this broken people that people were 1,500 years ago. The only difference is that we know that there's brokenness in ways that they didn't know there was brokenness 1,500 years ago. We're discovering more about human depravity now than we knew could exist then. We haven't attained. I don't think the basic human is any better than they were. I just think we understand that there is more kinds of depravity than we realized. And, it's like the idea that slavery is a moral evil, even if it was sometimes, if it had been a normal thing in the past. Like the Bible talks about treating slaves well, right? And the idea that you can own another person, that's abhorrent. And I think with reason. Of course, I also think that, it's also, first century slavery was not that much different than 20th century employment in terms of how it actually works. Because chattel slavery didn't really, wasn't always the way slavery was. That's something people don't take time to realize either. But
it didn't necessarily have an ethnic component, like an Italian could enslave an Italian from a civil war.
Yeah, absolutely, and not just that, but the idea that, Jonathan Swift was in debtor's prison. He was a slave of the state because he couldn't pay his bills. So that was a thing that was super common up until the 1780s. And it's not that I think I want to clarify something, because I don't believe that society knows it's more depraved. I think society knows that more deprivation exists.
I like how the Catholic Catholic on YouTube Distributist puts it, that in his video on H.P. Lovecraft, is that the history of humanity is monstrous because men are monsters. We are evil because we always return to evil.
Yes. Yeah. That's kind of what I'm talking about. It's just that like, we look back and we can look at, although they did horrible things, and I think in previous generations we realized. I think you look at the writings of the founders, especially the very religious ones like John Adams and George Mason, and they looked at human history as just the history of men violating each other, of just sin riding out across humanity. And things that we can look back now and say, even things that they didn't recognize as sin, we can say, oh, those were sinful too, because here's the moral law and how it violates it. I think that we can see that, but what I think our current society is unwilling to do is acknowledge their part in violating their fellow man's dignity. So that's really, I'm not trying to say that. I just think we can see more things as depraved, not that we can recognize our own depravity. I definitely do not believe modern man recognizes his depravity on general.
Nope.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's why Tulip starts with total depravity. I self-identify as a Calvinist. I prefer, it sounds cooler.
Yeah, that one cartoon really sent us down a lot of potential paths. So, all right, I'd love to. Yeah, I'd love to. So I will. If you're watching this, feel free to make suggestions to us, and we'll try to dig them up. We might not always be able to show them. What I might do is I might do like a test run first. What happens if I upload this to YouTube? And if I get copyright struck, that'll probably be like a good clue. We can't stream it if
lose your
no
channel.
one seems to care. Yeah, I could create like a dummy channel to test it out. YouTube's actually pretty lenient about it because they tend to just monetize whatever copyrighted content you upload anyway. So it's a little rare to get a copyright strike unless you're like deliberately trying to game the system somehow. But if possible, we'll watch it. Otherwise, we'll just watch it on our own ends and we'll make it into a riff track for the movie itself. But I would definitely be up for this. You guys have been great. So all of you are definitely invited back. Thank you, Matt Crotts, for hosting the number one Marmaduke fan show on your channel. Everybody should subscribe to Matt Crotts, subscribe to Matt and Carl. Fly Fox and Artistic Layman, do you guys have YouTube channels?
Yes.
I do.
Okay, I will link to those as well when I mirror this and send this out on social media. So it's been fun. Thank you all for joining, and thank you all who have watched and joined the chat. I really appreciate it.
Hold on, before we go, I'd like to say one thing also out there. I don't know if anybody is going to sit and listen to all of our bantering, but I'm going to tell you that I don't want to necessarily speak for everybody, but I would wager this is probably true. If any of you guys out there in YouTube land want to know more or are curious to hear about our Jesus, hit us up, because we're not just out here to kill time. At least I'm not. And I'm not here to beat people over the head with the Bible either, but there is one truth. There's one salvation of mankind, the Lord Jesus Christ, who came to earth as a man and died and rose again with the power of the Holy Spirit. And you should get to know him. He's amazing. So if you guys hit me up if you want to hear more. So
it's our favorite subject.
Seconded.
Fantastic. Well, with that, what possible better ending could there be than a call to believe in Jesus Christ? Thank you all so much. We'll catch you later.